Good evening. Just for the record, I'm Tanya Wilson-Sojourn, the Planning Manager with Community Planning and Development. I'd like to welcome everyone out this evening for the joint workshop between the City Council and the Planning Commission to discuss the city's comprehensive plan. It's hard to believe we're here again. We did this just 7 years ago. If you would recall, those of you that were here, show your hands. Very important process. It's good to see that folks are still engaged in the process of the comprehensive plan. We already had several workshops throughout the city. We actually had 2 workshops before the city, a presentation before Planning Commission, and at this juncture, we're having a joint workshop. We know the magnitude of the project itself is pretty extensive. The comprehensive plan has over 12 chapters. So what we'll do tonight, just to set the tone in terms of the process, we'll have our consultant, Michelle Melgren, an associate, come forward to provide a presentation. Pretty much the first part of the presentation is intended to be educational, just for the benefit of those that have not gone through the process before. We know that it can be a bit overwhelming, so what we hope to provide is the basic nuts and bolts of what's contained in the comprehensive plan in terms of the statutes, what's required in the process, and really just walk both the Planning Commission and the public through the 12 chapters of the comprehensive plan. Not in detail, but just the salient points. We'll provide an overview. And then, of course, the purpose of tonight's meeting is really just to have a dialogue between both boards, both the City Council and the Planning Commission, so we can gain consensus on the major issues as it relates to the comprehensive plan, and hopefully by the end of the meeting have clear direction for staff in terms of moving forward with a draft towards City Council. So without further ado, I'm going to invite our consultant, Michelle Melgren, to come forward so she can begin the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board and the Planning Commission. My name is Michelle Melgren. I'm a planning consultant, principal of the Melgren Planning Group, and I was actually here in 2007 for the update of the comprehensive plan then, and we are back again now. As Tanya pointed out, the purpose of this joint workshop tonight is to see if we can achieve consensus regarding density and intensity being height. I'll give you a little bit of background, though, about what a comprehensive plan is if you're not familiar with it. The comprehensive plan is something that is required by Chapter 163 of Florida statutes. The purpose of the comprehensive plan is to ensure that there are sufficient services and facilities to serve development and accommodate growth. So the comprehensive plan is a policy document. It's a vision for the future to help you in your decision making. What the plan is not, it's not zoning regulations. It's not specific regulations. It is, again, a broad policy document. Now, as Tanya mentioned, there are more than 12 chapters to the comprehensive plan. There are required elements that are required according to Florida statutes, and these include things such as future land use, transportation, housing, infrastructure, and a whole host of things. And then you can have optional elements, and here in North Miami we have an optional element already, which is the economic development element, and we've added a new element for this go-round of the update, which is the climate change element. Now, the update is required every 7 years. It's called an Evaluation and Appraisal Report, or an EAR, or EAR, as we call it. And the basic thing that we have to do in this EAR process is to identify changes to state law affecting the plan, and also identify any changes in current conditions or local conditions that have occurred since the last update. So what happened in 2007? That time that I was here in North Miami, there was a requirement in your city charter that height be limited to 4 stories. And there was a referendum that occurred back in 2007. We did a lot of community meetings to educate the public. And the idea was to take height out of the charter and put it in the comprehensive plan, as well as the zoning regulations. And we did that. Now, we struck some compromises along the way in order to accomplish that. And one of the compromises was there were some additional bonus units that I'll talk about in a moment. But before these bonus units could be allocated, it was put into the comprehensive plan and the zoning code that in order to get the bonus units, you would have to go through the conditional use process. It's not a very predictable process at all. It's a little cumbersome. And then in addition to that, there were other requirements in terms of the type of construction, or other projects, things of meritorious value that would have to be included. So that was put in both the comprehensive plan and the zoning code. Through the update process in 2007, we were able to identify 5,000 bonus units. There are a pool of 5,000 units available in North Miami. Currently, they're allocated to the downtown area, but we're proposing to reallocate some of those in this update. And then we finished the plan and the recession hit, and we never really had a chance to test out this plan because of the economic downturn. I would like to point out through this process that the EAR process is a technical process that we go through to meet statutory requirements. It is not intended to be an overhaul of the land use plan or the zoning map. It's certainly an item that you can look at. It's something that you're considering this evening, but that's not what the technical EAR process is about. So when we came on board to prepare the EAR, it had a very narrow focus because of the statutory requirements of what an EAR is. So in this current update that we have in 2015 has several areas of focus. We identified the changes to state law. We're proposing to reallocate some of the bonus units, about half of them, or 2,500, to be available around the city. We've added the climate change element, as I mentioned. We are recognizing the transit station that's going to be going in within the next 2 years or so, and have proposed a transit overlay district. We have the economic element that we've updated, and then in some of the other elements we've incorporated the capital improvement element and the water supply plan update. We took the proposed EAR to the Planning Commission on June the 10th, and there was a lively discussion, a spirited discussion, not so much about the EAR itself, the technical issues that it addresses, but really the discussion turned to adding greater density and height or intensity in the comprehensive plan. So we are here today because of that recommendation to see if there's a consensus for greater density and height in the comprehensive plan. So we have a couple of decision points. I'm going to go through these and then we'll go back to them one by one. The first decision point for you to consider as a joint board is to reallocate some of the 5,000 bonus units. And as I mentioned, that we are proposing to do that, leaving 2,500 in the main downtown area, but dispersing the other 2,500 around the city. Make all of the bonus units available citywide, or re-examine greater density and height above and beyond the 5,000 bonus units, that pot of units that's out there right now. If you decide to go with option number 3, looking at greater density beyond the 5,000 units, then we need to talk about water and water supply because that's a crucial factor. In North Miami right now, the city draws about 8.7 million gallons a day from the Biscayne Aquifer. You have known as a consumptive use permit to do that. And the balance of the water that you need to serve your population, which is about 5 to 6 million gallons a day, is purchased from Miami-Dade County. Now, you also have a consumptive use permit to draw about just under 8 million gallons a day from the Floridan Aquifer. That's another water source. But to use that consumptive use permit, you would have to build a reverse osmosis plant because the water in the Floridan Aquifer is very brackish. So the RO plant, or the reverse osmosis plant, was in your capital improvement plan up until about 2006. And if I understand correctly, the city had even purchased, I think, 6 lots on which to build the RO plant. In 2006, the RO plant was taken out of the capital improvement plan. At that time, 10 years ago, it was estimated that it would cost $53 million to build that RO plant. So, second decision point we're going to ask you to focus on is that the city wants greater density, and that's above and beyond the 5,000 units that's in that pool out there. Then there are 2 approaches that you can take. You can buy additional water from Miami-Dade County, and however much water you could buy, we can translate that into a population or a number of dwelling units, and that would be your limitation on growth. Or you can place no limitation on growth and build the reverse osmosis plant for some $60 million. Let's go back for a moment, though, and talk about the additional water from Miami-Dade. I was speaking with your water consultant, who's with the firm of Tetra Tech, and while the agreement that you have with Miami-Dade, he indicated to me, reads as if you can get unlimited water, he said that's really not the case. He said, so you would have to go and talk to Miami-Dade to see how much additional water you could purchase. And he said that perhaps in the realm of 5 million gallons of water a day may not be unreasonable. 5 million gallons of water a day translates into about 13,000 dwelling units, just to give you a perspective on that. So your second decision point will be, if you want greater density, you're going to have to decide if you will purchase water or if you want to consider building an RO plant. Now you have a third decision point I'm going to ask you to focus on, and that is currently mixed use. We have this pool of 5,000 units, and right now it's all allocated to the downtown. But if we decide to reallocate some or all of them, the question is do you want mixed use along some of the other major corridors outside of the neighborhood redevelopment overlay? And a major corridor, we could name some of them, but it would be up to you in your joint workshop to determine where you would want those units to go or not go. And finally, a fourth decision point. I had mentioned to you that at the time we updated the plan in 2007, there were compromises that were made. And one of the compromises put in the comprehensive plan, as I stated, was that you have to go through a conditional use process in order to get the bonus units. It's very uncertain. It's very cumbersome. And you're wondering why you're not seeing redevelopment. Well, it's difficult for a developer to go through an uncertain process. Time is money, and there's no certainty at the end of the day. So the fourth question is whether the city is willing to remove that particular impediment to redevelopment. It's in the comprehensive plan and the zoning code. And to ensure that you would get the kind of development that you envision, a quality development, you can address that in the zoning code by demanding a certain kind of urban form. So those are the four issues before you. We'll go back to the first one, though. Whoops. Excuse me. Right here. Let's talk about the 5,000 bonus units. You have that pot of units out there that no one has claimed any of them yet. So the question is do you want to leave them all in the downtown? We have proposed to leave 2,500 in the downtown, but make 2,500 available in other areas of the city. Or do you want to go and look at and density beyond the 5,000 units? And that's the first point for discussion.
What is the format? Are we going to open to public or what? Tanya?
Tanya's suggesting that perhaps there's a dialogue without any particular decision, and then opening it to the public. So the public can comment if they so desire.
Turn the microphone on. Do you have any?
I have one particular question, and I don't know if it's to the board or to the consultant. How did you determine the 25 units suggested for the downtown area?
That's arbitrary.
It was just a number. Just,
Okay.
Yeah, there's
No, okay.
50%, right, but there was
Got
no
it.
particular reason for that.
Okay.
Does the planning commission get to put its input in?
Well, I've always thought that 6th Avenue Northeast, from 125th going north to 135th, well, actually even beyond 135th, up to 143rd, could always be a good mixed-use a block, as well as a Dixie Highway, from south to north, from 123rd all the way up to our city boundary, and as well as Biscayne. And then we can entertain the discussion and make some plausible analysis to see how we can allocate those 25 units, break it down to each particular block. I think it's something that we can entertain and see how we can go from there. Yeah, really.
Well, you have 2,500 units, so that goes anywhere. It can go in the NRO or it can go outside. So I think we should wait to see if we have somebody who needs the bonus points. My question to you right now is, we have a comprehensive plan in front of us.
Yes.
I've read it. I don't know who out there has read it completely. It's an excellent plan that you've drawn up. I think you've added a lot of the sustainability issues, the green issues. You've address the statutory requirements that are needed for the 7 years. I think you've done a lot of work, other than a few typos, one of them being that our train depot is northeast, 125th, not northwest, because it refers all the way through northwest. And just, a few typos, a few cleanup, maybe a few ideas. But why can we not take your comp plan with the work that you've done, and there's a tremendous amount of work that has been added, global warming, the coastal flooding, all these items, why we can't go ahead, pass this, and if the council, the planning commission, if our residents want to go ahead, the only thing that it seems that is really missing is density and height, a mapping change. Now, I watched your planning commission, and you mentioned that to do additional density, we're going to have to do further studies. We're going to have to get approval from the state. So that's the first question. The second is, if we went ahead and passed this plan, there's no reason why we can't, the next day, meet again and start working towards additional height and densities and start earmarking and drawing out where we feel that we want to make changes.
Okay, I'll respond to your first question regarding the additional density. The allocation of the let me back up. If you add additional density over and above the 5,000 units, then yes, we are going to have to justify to the state, demonstrate that we can address all of the impacts, whether it's for public facilities and services. If it's an allocation or a reallocation of the 5,000 units, that does not require studying. That's already been accounted for in the current comprehensive plan. So to answer your second question then, it is certainly possible to go ahead and transmit the current ear-based amendments, the document that you read, to the state, bring it back and adopt it, and if the city wants to explore or have further dialogue about additional height and density, you could certainly do that and change the plan at a different time.
I mean, it seems like you've added additional bonus height downtown. You've got about 150 feet downtown because you've got 110 feet. With the bonuses, I think you added another 40 feet of density. So that's like 150 feet. I don't see anybody like clamoring to come in here at 150. In the meantime, if someone happened to come to us, we could in the meantime be working on changing our comp plan and getting that taken care of. But there's nothing to preclude us from going forward and changing, but, I think you drew up a good plan.
Thank you.
If there's a couple little tweaks, people feel we need, I mean, I don't see throwing this away, because you've done a lot of work.
Maybe we should go down. Why don't we open it to the board and we can start on
If
the
we can, the chair will invite Mr. Ernst to speak on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming. I know Mr. H. will probably want to say a few things with this. At the last Planning Commission meeting, this was rejected mainly because of the fact of the height and density issue involved with putting a restrictive amount of height in a very broad sense. Biscayne Boulevard, if you would look at the plan, only allows for a 55-foot high buildings along that stretch of corridor. I will point out that is in section 122 of the plan as it was presented to us by the consultant. We'll find it on page 122 of the section for the goals and objectives of volume 1. Yeah, it was, I'm sorry, actually it was 126, all of, on page 126, restrictions on height. All of the developments fronting on the Biscayne Boulevard corridor, beginning at northeast 123rd Street north to northeast 35th Street, shall maintain a maximum height of 55 feet and all future land use amendments shall conform to the 55 height restriction subject to the LDR as further defined. This is one of the items that we found objectionable because of the fact that with recognizing along your commercial corridor, if you wanted to invite developers who wanted to put in office buildings or mixed-use buildings, they would not be able to put in the height that they would require to draw the tenants or the businesses that you would find in downtown Miami or Coral Gables or in Hollywood or in Fort Lauderdale or any of our neighboring communities. We want to be able to at least not put a restriction for those developers to at least know that when they want to come to us and present a project, that they don't have that limit along Biscayne Boulevard. This is a problem, and I think it's going to also be a problem along your main corridor of 125th Street. We're not looking for some big bulk project that would take up with an ancillary parking garage. I would think that something that had height, we would look at an integrated type of structure that the parking would be included within the main structure of the office building, thereby, yes, increasing height, but at the same time taking that footprint and decreasing the footprint of the property. 150 feet along 125th Street might be restrictive in that manner. So I think we have to seriously look at what kind of restrictions we put on developers should they have any other plan other than something that would go to 150 feet, which is equal to about 15 stories. I think on a whole, this was what the objection was that the Planning Commission felt was a problem. I know there are areas along the bay that there were some issues with. I don't want to address that. I'm sure maybe there's some other members of the commission, and you may hear some input from the general public regarding that. But mainly we were concerned with the fact that we were locking ourselves in with a very low restricted height limit along Biscayne Boulevard and in some cases in the business district. And I think we need to look at the areas of 7th Avenue, West Dixie, and 6th Avenue as to the feasibility of how height restrictions can be used for the good and not put on a restriction for some sort of development along there, which could either be mixed use, commercial, or in some cases residential.
If I may add to what Charlie has said, in looking at the major commercial corridors of the city, Northwest 7th Avenue, the downtown business area, Northeast 6th, West Dixie Highway, and Biscayne Boulevard, we have capped ourselves far too low to make significant investment feasible. Effectively, you've got to buy land at the retail price for the time, and then you've got to build, and if you can't get enough height and sell enough units, you're not going to make any money as a developer. We have a major concern with the disability of the parking garage. Under the current plan, you not just have to have your building, you then have to buy another plot of land for the parking garage. The parking garage should not count against the height of the actual structure, and the parking garage should be placed beneath the structure. Otherwise, half of our development will be tied up with big block parking garages. We need to put the garage under the building and not count that toward the height of the building. We have to remove the disability of the parking garage in all areas. Then we look at mixed use. All of our corridors should be wide open mixed use. We shouldn't attempt to overly structure. You've got a situation along Northwest 7th Avenue where, over time, mixed-use development on both sides of the avenue would be very appropriate for both housing and retail businesses, provided, of course, you didn't have to double your footprint by building a separate parking garage. The garage should be incorporated into the plan of the building, and the building height should only address the saleable retail or residential occupied or office space of the garage, of the tower, not the parking garage. You've got to provide, in terms of downtown, you not only have to provide enough parking for that building, you've got to provide an overflow parking for the people who would come and visit the businesses in the downtown area and along Biscayne Boulevard. We know we haven't got the funding to build separate freestanding parking garages. They're going to have to ultimately be incorporated into the floor plan of new buildings as they come along. So what we do is we remove the disability on the garage, and we, if anything, incentivize the developer to provide additional parking so that building occupants and people visiting those commercial areas will have adequate places to park. Looking at our city, we are landlocked. The only way we'll grow the city otherwise is by annexation, and the only annexation to be had is areas that are already built out and developed. There are no vacant farmlands to be acquired. With that in mind, growth, yes, but we need to take optimal advantage of our commercial corridors to go with mixed use, increase the intensity and density, and remove the disability of the parking garage. If we don't do that, we're not going to see development in the next 7 years. It just won't be economically feasible for developers to come in and acquire the narrow parcels that we have available and build too low a project to make it worthwhile. You know, to support the commerce, we have to have parking. It's not realistic to expect separate parking garages to be built. It's positively unsightly. And in fact, by removing the disability of the garages, we greatly enhance the marketability of the Solomia project going up on the east end of town, if in fact it ever goes up. And by removing that disability, we make it much more feasible for developers to put up structures in the other principal corridors of the city, recognizing that the only real growth is going to come from growth going up rather than growth coming out. Yes, annexation will add some residents, but unless we add donor communities, the overall tax picture doesn't really change. So in order to change the tax picture and increase city revenues, we need market rate development wherever we can reasonably get it, and your places to put that is going to be along the principal corridors of the city.
Mr. Mayor, the other night at the council meeting, you said something that was very profound. Am I on?
Yes, you're on.
You said that when you eliminated the red light cameras, that we don't want to make our budget on the back of the people. Can you hear me now? There's a green light. There we go. That's good. There we are. We're the Planning Commission. We planned this right. Mr. Mayor, the other night you said something very profound, and that you said we don't want to make our budget on the backs of the citizens through fines and forfeitures. The only way we are going to make the budget and to have growth and a good quality of life is by developing the city. Right now, I have lived here since 1970. I see the city teetering. I see places all over the city that we could be developing. And I ask myself why. Why don't we look like Coral Gables? Why don't we look like Sunny Isles? Why don't we look like Bell Harbor, Bay Harbor, even Surfside? And it's because of our land use program. And it breaks my heart to see this city in the situation that it's in. If we don't develop the tax base and we don't go high, we're going to flounder. I've said this many, many times. I'd rather have a wealthy city helping poorer people than a poor city helping nobody. And that's where we're going to be headed if we keep going the way we're going. At the last Planning Commission, I was informed by Doug Hindmarsh that Keystone and Sans Souci, or Keystone predominantly, pays the majority of taxes within the city. That's true. Maybe they do. However, if we develop the rest of the city, we can take that burden off of them. And everybody else will be paying a fair amount of taxes if we build nice projects. We were fortunate enough at the last Planning Commission meeting to have our city manager and our public works director, or the city manager and our consultants come out and talk about the use of the infrastructure, water and sewer. And it can be done. We can purchase water from North Miami Beach, the county. And one of the things that we were all a little bit perplexed about, because we kept hearing this word of infrastructure, how does Sunny Isles, Bell Harbor and Surfside get their sewage from those big high-rise cities treated? They come through North Miami and the pipelines, and they get it treated up here on 151st Street, just east of the boulevard, in the sewer treatment plant. Well, why can't we do the same thing? To be told that if we don't have the infrastructure, we can't build. It's almost like the Council of Trent, when Galileo said, look, the world rotates, and the Council of Trent said, no, that's heresy. And he said, look through my telescope. And they replied, no, we don't want to look because we don't want to believe. Folks, we are teetering. Believe it. See what's going on. You know, all of a sudden the morass comes in. I remember 6th Avenue when I started as a police officer was a beautiful, beautiful street. And then gradually one building becomes decayed and the other building becomes decayed. And finally, all of a sudden, it's all around you. And you don't realize it's happening. I see it all over the city. And I say to myself, where did we go wrong? And I remember so clearly when we put a height moratorium on the city and can only go 4 stories. And we actually damaged the city. We said, oh my gosh, we want to keep it a bedroom community. Metro Rail came in. We don't want that. We don't want the Grand Prix. We don't want Home Depot. We don't want Johnson & Wales. We don't want LA Fitness. We don't want the new Publix. We don't want any development. We want to stay in 1970, 1980, and it's going to be a bedroom community. Well, we did succeed. We had the homeless sleeping under I-95. In fact, the other day, I drove to Northwest 7th Avenue, and I looked at those 2 fantastic motels over there, and I seen one renting $25 by the hour, $25 by the hour, and $45 for 2 hours. They gave you a discount for 2 more hours. Yes, we kept it a bedroom community. And this plan is what the consultant was told to do. But we are your eyes and ears. We are the Planning Commission. I sit here and I want the best for my city. I worked in other places. I grew up in New York. I was recently up in Chicago. I went out to my old city, Bolingbrook. I seen development. There is nothing wrong with development. There is nothing wrong with going high. And, you know, I looked at various areas, you know, Biscayne Boulevard. Everything west of Biscayne Boulevard to the railroad tracks could be rezoned from Arch Creek Road over to 122nd Street. Could all be 20, 30-story buildings and get rid of all the property that's dilapidated in there. We could change our corridor on Northwest 7th Avenue. Did anybody ever think of, when we look at Northwest 7th Avenue, the prime real estate we have there from 143rd Street to 119th Street? We have prime real estate. You get up on I-95 in the morning, and it takes you an hour to get downtown. There's people that come from Broward and further north. Now, why can't we change 7th Avenue from the, I don't even want to use the adjective, but from dilapidated condition that it's in, instead of having 1-story rehomogenized storefronts, why don't we go high-rise, 30 stories? Why don't we look at mixed use? I go downtown to the city of Miami and I see these beautiful structures down there. I look at Dixie Highway. I look at Biscayne Boulevard. And I scratch my head and I say, everything north of Exora Road on the east side of the street, why couldn't we go 20 stories there? Why couldn't we increase the density? And that was what we felt as your planning commission, your eyes and ears, your citizens, the indigenous people who live here, not only in Keystone or San Souci, but the rest of the city. We saw what we believe to be a shallow plan. No room for future growth, and that's why we're here tonight. There is nothing wrong with high rises. There is nothing wrong with future growth. There is nothing wrong with development. This nonsense of, well, the 5,000 bonus units, and we have to have this whole rigmarole for developers to come through. The word out there on the street is, we don't want to come to North Miami. They make it too complicated. Well, if we don't jump on the bandwagon now and change our philosophical viewpoint to development, mark my words, 7 years hence, we'll all be scratching our heads and saying, how are we going to make our budget? How are we going to do this? We have the golden opportunity right now. The other day, Mayor, you held that forum up there at Lexus, and I heard the city manager speak, and he spoke very profoundly also. You have statesmen working for you, I want you to know. He said, if you look to the south of us, you see high rises. You look to the north of us, you see high rises. You look to the east of us, you see high rises. And you look at that blimp, in North Miami, what do we have? We don't have it. Yes, Mayor, I agree with you. Yes, City Manager, I agree with you that we have to go high. We have to increase our density. Otherwise, we're going to lose this city, and this is the golden opportunity. And to wait for later than rather doing it now. If we approve this comp plan the way it is today, we're not going to get anything done. Let's stop kidding ourselves. We got to get the nuts and bolts done on this workshop or in future meetings or whatever. Otherwise, we just floundered a whole year, and there is nothing wrong, again, with growth. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, with due respect, Mr. Each did bring up another rather interesting point. I talked in terms of mixed use along 7th Avenue, and the point he brings out to you is that our current land use plan has legitimized prostitution in those hotels that he spoke so eloquently about. Now, frankly, Randy's restaurant would much rather have market rate clientele than the prostitutes and their customers across the street from them. Realistically, the market rate developments are going to do a lot more to strengthen the retail community on 7th Avenue than those current motels. And the only reason those motels are there is because the land value has not gone up, because the building heights are too low. Nobody can buy enough property to build anything. So we just leave it and forget it. We have a land use plan that has catered to benign neglect for too long. We understand the economic downturn, but we also understand that the overall incentives are not there to build. We need to have tax incentives for economic development. We need to have increased density. We need to be not so concerned with height. We need to absolutely remove that disability for the parking garage. There are things that can be done with this plan, and the Planning Commission voted this plan down because we did not see it as a roadmap for future development. We saw it as just maintaining the status quo as we've been doing for so many years. I compliment Kenny for saying that we are a city in the 70s. I rather think we're largely a city from the 50s. And unfortunately, those 1950s look great on black and white television, but times have changed. And we need a land use plan that's going to lead us into the 21st century. Clearly, the existing plan is not up to task. I know that there's a great deal of fear and concern over the RO plant because it has a big ticket cost. But you know, if we don't control the water in this city, we aren't going to control the development. And realistically, the Planning Commission feels the RO should go back into the capital plan. And if the heights and densities really work the way they should, the tax revenue will come in that will allow us to get that plan built. But if we don't have it in the capital plan, we can't pursue the funding for it in the first place. Shirley?
There's also the possibility that the reverse osmosis plant may become a necessity. We may, in fact, not be able to. We may be in a situation where we're we're in competition for water from Miami-Dade and the water management system in South Florida, and we could in fact maybe lose what we already have allocated to us down the stretch. Water is a main concern, and if we don't start thinking ahead and saying we better have another alternative method in getting our water supply and taking care of our needs, we may in fact be in trouble like the rest of the communities around us. So I agree with Kevin that that reverse osmosis plant does need to be strongly considered to be put back into the budget somehow, future budget plans, whatever it takes, and get it done. Even if it's 5 or 10 years down the road, you know, we have to take that risk, because I think within 15 or 20 years, again, water may be something that will become so costly to have to buy from the county or from any other source in South Florida, that we may be too late if we don't move on this as soon as possible.
Thank you, Charlie.
Go ahead.
Well, first and foremost, Mr. Seyfried, I understand your frustration with that particular location in my district. I too wish I would wake up it's gone. And I don't know exactly which of the council members that you were, I think Mr. Each, your comment was, I have no problem with making sure that we have not only affordable but great development in our city, but especially the corridors of 7th Avenue and beyond 7th Avenue. I'm for the high rise. I don't have any problem, because I do understand that we must be moving forward in order for us to be in the city on the move. Now, my question is to the consultants. Obviously, this is a great plan, and the commission has some issues. How do we combine their suggestions or their comments to make this into a plan that I would more likely support? And the second question is the RO plan. Is it the $60 million price tag? Is this currently, or was this before the 60 million? And a third follow-up, and I'm sorry if I'm just giving you questions. Can this 60 million, if that's the current price plan, can that be through a referendum, or how does that other cities address that?
I'm going to.
The 60 million, I believe that's what she said.
It was actually 53 million
Yes,
in
back then.
2006.
Exactly.
I don't
So
know
it'd be
what it
much
would.
more. Okay.
So I rounded it up to 60
So
because
it could be 80. Okay.
it could be. That's correct.
Mr. Ghani would know that, Aunt.
You,
Yeah.
Mr. Ghani?
Mr. Ghani, do you remember?
It's around 70. Okay, so the that,
Yeah, altogether was approximately 100 million when the plan was done. The lime softening upgrade, we are looking at approximately 20 million for the upgrade of the 9.3 MGD lime softening, and the additional 7 to 8 million from the RO plant would be the additional amount of money. But the good thing about reverse osmosis, you bring in the number of skids that you need immediately to start meeting your demand for water. As it is right now, we produce approximately 8.5 to about 9.1, 9.2 on a daily demand from lime softening. And we buy approximately 3 to 4 million, depending on the time of the year, from Miami-Dade. So if we have to build the RO plant presently, the RO plant would be designed for your maximum, but you bring in the skids, the actual treatment skids, for 3.5 million gallons. As population increase, density increases, then the skids for the RO plant would be coming in as your population increases. So your plant will be built for the capacity, but the actual production would be to meet your present population demands.
And
Now, let me
Mr.
answer.
Mr. Ghani,
Yes.
we currently sell water to other communities, correct? That would also play into as a factor of being able to profit and help us
That's correct.
by having that available
Right.
water to, say, a North Miami Beach or Bal Harbor, who in fact have to rely on other sources because they don't have their own water treatment.
That's correct.
So-
We actually produce
so
water.
We could become I hate to say it, but we could almost become a little profit center
Sure.
for ourselves.
Right.
With this process online.
Presently, we
correct?
produce water for the 60,000 residents of North Miami and provide water outside the city to about approximately 85,000 people. So we do supply outside the city, which is unincorporated Dade County, Miami Shores, and Biscayne Park.
And was I right on my calculations about the water supply within the South Florida area becoming less available?
Right, it's becoming a scarce commodity.
So I wasn't wrong in assuming that it could become a critical situation where they could in fact raise their prices
Right.
to meet the demand.
That's correct. And if you look at the, Miami-Dade projections, I believe in January of this year, there was an article in the Herald that says water rates are going to increase over 33% over the next 5 years. And that's to meet all the infrastructure requirements that is planned. I think Jason and I were just talking about some force mains. Their whole infrastructure, both water and sewer, they're going to be spending billions of dollars. Nobody has an exact number, but they talk from anywhere from $4 billion to $10 billion. If we are on that system, we would be paying into that as well.
Right. So, our outdated car can't run any longer. At a certain point, we need to get a new car.
We need to, that's
Thank you.
correct.
Mr. Manager, would you reiterate what you did about how we have the license now to go in through South Florida Water Management District?
Right.
Would you
I believe our consultant covered it. We do have the consumptive use permit is a permit, an actual withdrawal permit that we get from South Florida Water Management District. And that permit allows us to actually extract 9.3 million gallons from the Biscayne aquifer, which is a shallow aquifer, and an additional 7 to 8 million gallons from the Floridan, which is a deeper aquifer. That is a little brackish. That's the water that we're going to be using the reverse osmosis process or treatment process to meet or supplement the demand.
But we have that, what would you call it, a license? Or
We do have the permit for the
The permit.
extraction, and that was worked on, I
have that.
believe, 4 years ago we got that, yes. And it's a 20-year permit. So the permit that we have is a 20-year consumptive use permit issued by South Florida Water Management District.
So
And does
we
it
only
cover-
have 15 or 16 years left. to get
Remaining on it,
done.
yes.
Does the permit cover the 5,000 additional unit, or do we need
It covers all the water supply that
Okay.
our consultant has referred to.
Was referred to,
Yeah, the
yes.
5,000 units are good to go, so to
Got
speak.
it.
We don't have to address any additional impacts.
Correct.
That's all been taken care of.
You were going to answer my question?
I was going to answer your
No,
question,
I'm
yes.
sorry.
You had asked about how to finance it, and I'll
Yes.
defer to the city manager on that, but you asked what we could do to this plan to put it more on track, I think as you said, in a way to
Yes.
encourage redevelopment. I would go back, if it's the consensus and I get this direction, which is why we're here this evening, I would go back and identify certain corridors where you would have additional height and density. I would allow for mixed-use development. I would take out of the comprehensive plan and the zoning regulations the requirement for a conditional use permit and additional requirements in order for you to get your hands on those bonus units, because it's very cumbersome and too unpredictable. Along that line, however, if that's going to happen, I would strongly recommend making changes to the zoning code so that the urban form of the projects that you get is something that's desirable to the city of North Miami. You want quality development, not just development. You can do that through your zoning regulations. And that would be the start. And as far as the allocation, I had asked about, if you could give me some direction on what you want to do with the 5,000 bonus units, leave it all in the downtown or split it 50-50. I would suggest we look at a couple of different scenarios, I guess, before I could make a recommendation on that. There's certainly things that we could do, but I need direction. I need a consensus.
They could put it on my district.
Mr. Mayor, with due respect, the
Yeah.
planning commission, I think would probably, I'm gonna stick my neck out a little bit here, but I kind of think if we made those 5,000 floating units available unrestricted anywhere in the city, that would be a pragmatic beginning. And then we see what developers come back and propose as time goes on. Obviously, nobody had an interest in them for the last 7 years. We'll have to see, but I would say the fewer restrictions we place on developers, the greater the prospect of creativity. And so it would be my suggestion that we make them available anywhere in the city that someone has ideas to make use of them. And then see what happens in the future years, 3 years down the road, 6 years down the road, we go back and revisit the prospect of restrictions here or there, but the prospect of 5,000 units being built in the next 7 years is rather limited. If we look at all the explosive growth on Brickell, that's only encompassing some 3,600 units. And according to the people who study that, that's pretty much petered out. So,
I mean, I like the idea of the allocation. I'm not gonna lie somewhere, and so I don't know where the other folks on the panel.
Before actually, I must say that my hat is off to the Planning Commission because it is very obvious that we have a commission that with forward thinking, and I've said it in my acceptance speech, the first and second one, and everybody knows, and I'm not hiding the fact that I am for height, and this is, we have less than 1% of our land being vacant. So there is no other way to go but high. And it's beautiful to see tall buildings, as a matter of fact, especially when they build in a very artistic way. And you go to cities, and that's all they have, tall, mixed-use buildings. I'm not going to try to compare North Miami to Manhattan, but I'm sure that Manhattan at one point of time was like North Miami. And it took
several hundred years ago, that's correct.
several hundred years ago. And I'm not going to try to compare it to Venice or Rome or any other megapole. But this is 2015. Maybe in 2050 we can be a city close to like Manhattan. But we have to have a vision for it. If we do not have a vision, we don't have any forward thinking, we will never get there. Maybe people simply do not want to get there. Sometimes people just take the key of the automobile, they throw it away, and they say the engine won't start. That's why we can't go from point A to point B. But if we had the key, we would be able to start the engine. But I think it's time for us to rev up the engine. And I sit on the MPO board, as you may know it, and I was appointed not too long ago by the chair to address some issues about transportation and road development. And in that commission, you should see the type of planning that the Miami-Dade County has. They have 5, 10, 20-year plans, 20-year plan. And as a city located in Miami-Dade County, we should be aware of what's going on in the county or how the county is, a commission is thinking. And for us to think along the same way. They're talking about sea transportation. Hey, we're talking about Auto Board coming up. We're talking about a possible train station right there on not too far from us. And I believe I heard that North Miami Beach has already passed either ordinance or resolutions to have 30-story buildings around the railroad tracks because they're expecting a station to be there. So they are thinking forward, and we are next door. And I'm the type of person, I don't like to be behind the bandwagon. When I was in Haiti, I came here to this country because it's a very, very, very great country. I think we are living in the best country of the entire world. And In Haiti, there are a lot of things that I did not know. I was not exposed to them, but I read them in books. But I came here and I had the opportunity to visit cities and I see how people, Puerto Vallarta, that's where I had my honeymoon a few years back. And when we were there, I believe it, I got married when? In 2000, 2001. I hope my wife is not watching.
Be careful, this is for the
And,
record.
and when we were there, and we were actually going through some, and it wasn't just the tourist areas. They took us to some excursions, and when we look at these places, they told us it only took them 20 years to go from nothing to the city that they were back in 2011. I mean, 1. And I'm dying to go back and to see what Puerto Vallarta looks like now. And we simply have to move forward. And as far as the come back to the possible allocations of the 5,000 units, and I like the idea of just leave it open to wherever because we don't know what the developers may be looking at. Before the developers come to a city, they do their homework. Believe me, before they come in, they probably know all the demographics more than we do. Because they have staff that come in and they do visits. We don't know who might be looking at 7th Avenue now. We don't know who might be looking at West Dixie, 6th Avenue. They're probably just waiting. They're probably just waiting for us to make the decisions. And it behooves us, to really put our thinking hat on and open the city, really. It can only be good as long as we actually shape the change that we want to do for this wonderful city of ours. The city on the move, the city of North Miami. Okay. So my one question would go not only to the consultant, but to Tanya as well. What would be the pros and cons? We have to analyze the pros and cons if we just allocated half to the city and then half throughout the whole city. I mean, half to the downtown area and then half throughout the whole city, and versus leaving it open to all the 5,000 units to the whole city.
The upside to leaving it open would be, of course, it would be market driven, as you suggested, Mayor, and developers would come in. They know where the market is and the units would be available wherever they think it would be appropriate. The downside to doing that, however, is if the city is really trying to see redevelopment of the downtown area, it's a certain incentive that you have there available to. I'm sorry, what was that? Yeah, to incentivize redevelopment in the downtown. So I would recommend not turning all 5,000 loose. I would preserve something in the downtown area. Maybe half is too many. Mm-hmm. It's actually something we would need to examine and take a look at to give you an educated, a basis to make an educated decision on how many units should stay in the downtown and how many should be released elsewhere.
Can I say something, Mr. Mayor?
In that light, if I could ask the consultant, Mr. Mayor, in that light, again, I think the Biscayne corridor can't be overlooked as a part of this equation, mainly because it's more high profile and it's likely to be the one spot where developers may have more of an interest in developing first prior to looking at downtown. So in other words, we need to really assess which of the areas would be most important. I think that's why the general consensus was that we allow the equal distribution of your bonus points throughout the city. I don't know how anybody else feels on that.
May I ask a question of the consultant, please, and of the planning manager? If we did away with the 5,000 units and say we want to increase it to 10,000, say you brought up a good point. Suppose we're going to get that tri-rail station over there on 123rd Street. Am I correct on that, Olin? Yeah. Okay. That whole area in there is ripe for redevelopment from the boulevard all the way over to the tracks, from 123rd Street north to Arch Creek. Suppose we go 20, 30 stories in there. That's what we're looking at. You want to go 20, 30 stories on Northwest 7th Avenue. You want to increase your density possibly on the other side of Biscayne Boulevard from Exora North, or in the San Souci area, or Northeast 6th Avenue. Is that only going to be just 5,000 units, or is it going to be 10,000 units? Or maybe, what I'm thinking is, I think we should do away with the 5,000. We know that we can use 5,000. What I think we should do is go back to the drawing boards and see where we want to increase the height, like 7th Avenue, that type. Dixie Highway, 6th Avenue, where we want to increase the height, see how many units we're going to have, increase the density, and then see if you want to put those bonus points out there, or just do away with them entirely.
Well, I wouldn't.
I'm sorry.
No, you don't want to do away with them. You
Okay.
want to keep them. They're a good thing.
No, tell me why. You said we have 5,000.
We have, here's what we did last time we updated the comprehensive plan in an effort to do something that would make some redevelopment potential available. We went out and did some simple calculations.
Okay.
We looked at let me explain how we came up with these 5,000 units. So we looked at a land use designation, say it was all of the residential land use designations, and we looked at the land area in each of those designations. And then we did the math. So if it was 5 units per acre and we had 100 acres, 500 units. And then we went on the map and we actually counted what lots were out there, physically counted, and the difference between what was physically on the ground compared to what the math yielded was 5,000 additional units. So we were able to justify 5,000 additional units without having to go through the exercise of demonstrating how we've addressed the impacts, because it was already assumed in the plan that those impacts have been addressed.
Can you increase?
Now, yes, we could increase, but here's what's going
Is
to
that
happen.
going to be predicated on the water sewer infrastructure?
You're going to have water, number one. So you've talked tonight about putting the RO back in the CIP, in the capital improvements plan, but we would have to go back and examine all impacts. So it would be on water, sewer, police, transportation, the whole 9 yards. That's what the state would require. And in discussions in my office, because we've talked about this long and hard, trying to figure out what to do, I had mentioned during my presentation that if you could negotiate an additional 5 million gallons of water per day with Miami-Dade and get that extra 5 million gallons per day, if you do the math according to people per household and all of that stuff, it would result, you could support roughly, and I'm speaking in round numbers now, about an additional 13,000 dwelling units. That's
13,000.
Well, wait, let me finish though, and that's great. So, but the issue we think we would face is if we went to the state, they're not going to give you all 13,000 at once. They're going to go, that's ridiculous. But you could go there incrementally for sure.
Okay, so would we not look at then rezoning specific areas within the city, 7th Avenue, 6th Avenue, Arch Creek area, would we not look at changing the height limitations there, or changing the zoning completely from single-family households to high-rises? Would we not want to do that now? Would that be the plan for the future? You have a roadmap to go with and see what comes. I give you Mayor, you're on the MPO. We know for a fact that the county Expressway Authority wants to link up to Palmetto with I-95 on 119th Street. I cry when I drive down that street, and I'm thinking a little bit out of the box for the future, maybe 20 years, 10 years, whatever the heck it is. That street could be turned around to be a gold mine if we rezone it from 119th to 120th to 121st. You put in these beautiful warehouses. The Panama Canals are going to almost be finished. You're going to have those Supermax trucks, trucks, listen to me,
But we
boats.
can't remember now, some of that's state county.
No, I'm talking about our side of the street. I'm talking
The
about
north-
our,
the north side.
the north side.
North side.
You know, and these are things that I think we should be looking at. Strategically, you talk about strategic plannings, and this is something, you create a green belt. Look what they did over there at Westview Country Club. They just knocked that down to build areas for mass warehouse. There's nothing wrong with that. I've seen these beautiful things up in Illinois. They're gorgeous. So this is what I'm getting at. Should we not look at the map and say, this is where we should go?
Chief, here's my, I guess my take on it. I don't, the reason that I do support the allocation, I'm just sick and tired of District 4, 7th Avenue not getting anything, and I don't want us to just have it out there. When you do have equally allocation, and I don't mind it being 13, although I see the reasonable, because I'm not looking at, we don't want any additional impacts on police, transportation, et cetera. So maybe a moderate number, maybe 10 or 9, whatever it is, but equally allocated, and I would support the majority or something living in the downtown area, if that's what the council people representing that area, I'm fine with that. My question to you would be, with the additional allocation, how do you take the suggestion from what we're hearing tonight? Do you go back, this is such a good plan, do you go back and scratch everything, or you just kind of,
No,
okay,
we,
Tanya, you had,
Yeah.
you mentioned something about 7th Avenue,
If I could add,
about the IT, the high-tech companies and,
for innovation zones. Okay.
Can you elaborate on that for?
The innovation zone, it's one of the policies that we're proposing in the plan. The fact that 7th Avenue, we've gotten quite a bit of interest over the years. It's close to the 95 corridor, it's close to the Gratney. You have visibility from different entry points, and you also have very deep lots. People don't recognize that it's actually not residentially zoned, even though you have the non-conforming lots there. On the map is actually commercially zoned, and it has a commercial designation, land use designation. So we've recognized over the years that there's an interest in possible biotechnology, IT, information system along that corridor, and it really would benefit the city to create incentives to attract those types of industries to the city. It's never been explored, but it's one of the policies that are being recommended through the comprehensive plan, that we consider creating an innovation zone there. And if I could go back to the question that you asked initially, Mr. Mayor, regarding the allocation of the units. We have two proposals before us. One, to keep 50% of those bonus units within the downtown, and to release the remaining 50% citywide. Or I think someone recommended to have just the universal allocation of all 5,000 units throughout the entire city, almost like a peanut butter effect throughout the entire city. If we could roll back the clock, we recognize why we had created that Central City Downtown Incentive Pool. Back in 2007, the mayor and council had designated greater densities up to 90 dwelling units per acre. It's the most dense area of the city intentionally, because the idea is to incentivize development. Over the years, we've found, since the recession hit, things slowed down to a crashing halt. But since then, with the economy healing, we have seen quite a spur and an interest in redevelopment in the downtown. And I would say particularly it's because we have made the pot sweeter, I would say. With the 90 dwelling units per acre, it's the densest of densities within this region. When we had done a density analysis, we found it's far greater than any other city offers. So it's important not to lose that competitive advantage that we created back in 2007, and not to misread the market. Not because the recession was here does it mean that your plan or incentive is a failure. It means you need to give it an opportunity to mature, but the incentive itself is attractive. It is attractive to the development community up to the 90 dollars per acre, and you don't want to minimize that competitive advantage that you currently have by releasing it citywide and not having a pool that's dedicated just to the downtown area. So I just wanted to add that clarification.
Okay, so is the question now on increasing the amount of units? Is there a consensus to do 10, 10,000 versus the 5, or where are we still discussing?
Well, I understand there's a requirement to increase it beyond 5,000.
The requirement would be, if we increased it beyond the 5,000, that we would have to demonstrate how we are addressing the impacts.
Could we demonstrate that?
Well, we could always, yes.
Okay.
I mean, there's a way.
Then
Where
let's
there's
go
a
for
will,
the
there's a
gusto.
way. For some reasonable number. If you go to the state and say, I want another 10 or 15,000 units when you have 5 you haven't used, they're not going to buy into that.
What would you,